Hello and welcome to episode number 2 of Ask the Longevity Doctor, the show where I put your questions about health, wellness and longevity to a health medical professional. Now, my name is C.R.O.N. I am a master's student studying at University College London, specialising in cell and gene therapy. I'm also a research analyst for Going Life, and I'm going to be your host today. And today I'm also joined again by Dr. Oliver Zolman.
Hello. Yes, I'm Oliver. So I'm a medical doctor based in Cambridge in the UK, founder of 21 Consulting, and we're a company that's running rejuvenation trials to reverse the aging process in every organ, and we're hoping to do that by 2030.
Great, and today we're talking about the calorie restriction with optimal nutrition. So as always, if you guys have any questions, please post them in the chat and then I'll get to them at the end. So Ollie, why don't you start us off by telling us a bit more about the properties and principles of calorie restriction?
Yeah, so let's kind of carry on from last week. So last week we talked about the overall 3 longevity levels. There's level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is 6 things, and one of them is calorie restriction. So the key thing with level 1 is to understand that if you do all 6 things in level 1, you have a 95% chance of living to age 75, and a 50% chance of living to age 94, and a 5% chance of living to age 98. This is without doing any of the level 2 or level 3 stuff. And the calorie restriction component within level 1 gains you plus 5 years versus if you don't do the calorie restriction. And this is based on computer simulations, because we haven't done the studies which last for 60 years in humans, or 10, 20, 30, 60 years. But we have done them in rhesus monkeys. So they're monkeys that normally live around 30, 35 years. And we've also done studies in other model organisms and also shorter term studies in humans lasting about 10 years or so. And it's combining all of these data together across all the data that we have, that we can come up with an estimate of how much impact it'll have. So the estimate from this computer simulation study was plus 3 to 7% increase in life expectancy. And so the middle of that is 5%. And then if you add 5% to around 80 years, or your life expectancy, when you're doing the other parts of level 1, it comes out at around 5 years. So that's a little overview of the of how it fits in with the levels framework. So it's a level 1 intervention because there's good enough evidence to suggest that at least in men, not women, it adds at least 2 years of stackable healthy life expectancy to people, to most people. And that's the requirement to be a level 1 therapy, to have good enough evidence that it adds at least 2 years of healthy life to most people.
So I mean, I know it sounds very sort of explained in the name, but tell me what calorie restriction is. How much do we have to restrict our calories to actually have an impact? And when did we first start to learn about this as a concept?
Yeah, so the key thing is to understand the difference between restriction and reduction. So restriction normally means, at least in my understanding, is you're doing it below the RDA or the NRI. So the RDA is like recommended daily allowance for men. It differs for everyone, but for men, it's normally around 2,500 calories. For women, it's normally around 2,000 calories. So if you're doing calorie reduction, that doesn't mean you're necessarily going below that. But if you're doing calorie restriction, it means, you're going below your personal RDA. So if your personal RDA was, 2,700 as a man with a high metabolic rate, then it could be doing 10% less than that. So normally you need at least 10% restriction to gain maybe at least 50% of the effects, is a kind of reasonable estimate. But the maximum effects may be 20% reduction or even a little bit more. So that's the kind of what it means, calorie restriction. And then that's the first you never want to do calorie restriction by itself. So that's the first two letters in the acronym. So the acronym is C.R.O.N, C-R-O-N. And the O-N part stands for optimal nutrition. And what that means is basically you're tracking every micronutrient and macronutrient and micro and macro toxin as well, you could say, and making sure you're not getting any deficiencies or insufficiencies in all those nutrients. Because it's very risky with calorie restriction that because you're eating less calories, you can very quickly, over a matter of months, start accumulating deficiencies in multiple vitamins or minerals or other essential things, etc. So it's always C.R.O.N, it's never CR, it's always C.R.O.N. And it's the same in the studies, really. They always make sure that the participants in the studies are having enough micronutrients and macronutrients to get them above their RDA level for those micronutrients and macronutrients, so that they're not getting deficiencies, even though they're having less calories overall.
So as you attested to in your sort of intro, one of the best ways to determine if an intervention actually works in humans is to trial it in animals that are closely related to humans. Now, there's a couple of experiments which are really big in the calorie restriction with optimal nutrition sort of space, carried out in the United States at the University of Wisconsin and the National Institute of Aging on the NIA, which looked into calorie restriction in rhesus monkeys. I was just wondering if you could dive a little bit into that and what was the framework of the studies and what were the results and what did they tell us more about calorie restriction?
Yeah, so it's a little confusing and it's quite complex to explain the step-by-step process where you analyze the studies. It would take quite a long time. So I've written a blog post on that and I linked it to the article here, or to the show notes. But basically, so they did multiple groups. So there's two studies. There's UW and NIA. And in each study, there was a control group where they had a certain amount of calories, and then an intervention group where they had less calories. And there was then subgroups within these where they either started it before, depending on the study as well, there's different subgroups. But in one of the studies, there's a subgroup where they started it before adulthood, like quite a young age. And then there's the other subgroup where they started it like age 40 plus human equivalent. And so the summary to take away from it, once you're looking through all the data, is basically it doesn't work if you're starting it before you're fully grown. It's only going to work for if you're doing it after you're fully grown, and it's probably only going to work if you're a male, but it may still work a little bit if you're female. And so if you're male, by that I mean it's going to increase based on this study, it's going to increase your life expectancy and health expectancy. But if you're female, potentially because you're already living a bit longer already, potentially because the RDA for females is already 2,000 calories, so you're already kind of naturally doing 20% calorie restriction compared to men. The monkey studies didn't show that it increased overall life expectancy, but it did increase health expectancy. So they had less bad aging and higher quality of life for a lot longer compared to the female monkeys that started calorie restriction when they were fully grown and then did it for their whole lives. That's the key thing. It's not like they did it for 1 year and then stopped, but they're doing it for their whole lives. So there's a lot of confusion between the studies, people say, normally, because like the studies, it's hard to compare the groups because some of the control groups were already undergoing a bit of calorie restriction already. But then if you compare the groups between the studies, adjusting for those calories, and also against the historical data of the several thousand monkeys they have in the database of this breed of monkeys that they have, when you adjust for the calorie intake in the control group, you find that, yeah, it does work a lot. And you're like 417 times more likely, if I'm doing the numbers correctly. This is my blog post, so you can critique it all there. but you're 417 times more likely to be a monkey centenarian equivalent if you're doing if you're a male doing calorie restriction than if you're not. So monkey centenarian equivalent is like living to age 40 as a rhesus monkey in this breed of monkeys. I think that's how you pronounce it, rhesus.
Yeah, no, I think it is.
Yeah, rhesus.
I mean, that's how I say it. I might be saying it wrong as well, but we'll go with that.
Yeah. So, and that's pretty crazy. So yeah, if you like look at the rates of rhesus monkeys that normally live to age 40, it's kind of the same as the rate of humans that naturally live to age 100 without any advanced medicine.
And I think one of the big points from those two studies is, like you said, I think one of the major differences was the fact that so one of the studies, I think it was the Wisconsin one, showed a lot more sort of efficacious results for dietary and calorie restriction being effective than the NIH group. And I think actually when they looked at the two groups and what they were actually fed, I think the calorie restricted group in the NIA study they were given, they found that the monkeys really wouldn't eat the food just because it wasn't that great. So they would supplement it with a load of sucrose, which sweetened it and actually meant they ate more. But it kind of put in a bit of a sort of a fundamental flaw where they were giving a very high dose of sucrose with the diet as well, which I think was because I think both sets of scientists came together after and actually discussed the results. And they did say that, you know, even though they had maybe not the most efficacious results in the NIA study, that they could agree that calorie restriction was having a good effect on lifespan. So yeah, I think they're really, really interesting studies. So yeah, I'd definitely go and read your blog post about it and even read the original studies. I think they're definitely worth it.
Yeah.
But so talking more about animals, and obviously we've learned a huge amount from animal studies into lifespan and dietary restriction. Is there any other sort of species that we've looked at? I know that Ames dwarf mice, I think are quite a studied species, and you know, worms and stuff. Yeah, what else have we learned from animal studies?
Yeah, so it works in a lot of model organisms. So naturally aging mice, you know, the ones that aren't genetically modified to be quite different from how they are in the wild. So yeah, mice, it quite reliably increases mouse maximum and medium lifespan. And what that means in like technically is that when you look at the Kaplan-Meier survival curve, it increases the 90th percentile and the 50th percentile.
So just
the maximum median.
What are those? What is the Kaplan-Meier curve? Just give us a sort of.
Basically, it's like the percentage of surviving animals. In this case, you can use it for lifespan or any kind of clinical endpoint, really. But it's the percentage of surviving animals over time. So you have a number of days on the x-axis, and you have percent of mice or monkeys that are alive by a certain age. Mm-hmm. And then if there's more alive at the midpoint on the y-axis, 50, then that's an increase in. You do like a like a log rank test for significance between survival in these two groups. And if there's a significant log rank result at y equals 50, then that means you've increased median lifespan. And if there's and then the same at y equals 90, then you've increased maximum lifespan. And it's important to see the maximum stuff because that's harder to do, and it's more suggestive that you're actually affecting the intrinsic rather than extrinsic, in other words, accelerated aging process, than if you're just affecting median lifespan, which could be that you're affecting you're slowing the accelerated aging, but you're not affecting fundamental aging itself, potentially.
And is there any, sorry, carry on. You carry on.
Yeah, so an interesting thing with the mice studies, it doesn't work in all species. So it doesn't work in progeroid model mice, I think. So those are mice that I think I don't know if they have the same mutation as progeria. And progeria is like a super fast accelerated aging disease where you you look like you're 80 years old plus by age 10. It's really bad. But it doesn't seem to work in that case. But it's not really a good model of aging, progeria. But what is interesting is that when it does work when you put Amy's dwarf mice on calorie restriction. So these are mice that have mutations in their growth hormone receptor, and so I think they have quite low IGF-1 and low growth hormone or low growth hormone signaling. They also have low TSH and prolactin, I think, as well, but that's not really as relevant. But what's interesting about that is that you can kind of induce that state by giving rapamycin. So I haven't seen any studies where people do like mouse lifespan studies with rapamycin plus calorie restriction. But this Amy's dwarf mice study where they do the Amy's dwarf mouse, normal lifespan, wild type mouse lifespan, then the Amy's dwarf mice live longer, whether they have CR or not, because they have the fake the genetic rapamycin equivalent of taking low dose rapamycin all the time because they've got super low growth hormone. And then they find that if you put those Amy's dwarf mice on calorie restriction as well, then they live even longer. So like a lot longer as well. So that suggests potentially that rapamycin plus calorie restriction is stackable, and the mechanisms of action are kind of like a overlapping Venn diagram. So whether some will be similar and then some will be separate by the looks of it. And that's why you get like double the gain in life expectancy potentially than just doing rapamycin or just doing CR. And then rapamycin is level 3 therapy. That's how I classify it.
But to give a bit of background, so rapamycin is a drug which is it's usually used as a immune suppressant, isn't it, for pre sort of organ transplants.
Yeah.
And I think they found that it had a massive effect on lifespan. I think they first found it in mice, and it essentially, if I'm not wrong in saying that it almost mimics the effects of calorie restriction.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't.
Okay, all right.
So it's like an overlapping Venn diagram.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like rapamycin in this circle here, then calorie restriction here, and they're like the effects, right? Like the mechanism of action. And there's like some in common, but because they stack on Amy's, because calorie restriction, when you give it to Amy's dwarf mice, increases their life expectancy even more, it suggests they're separate mechanisms of action. Because if you give normal wild type mice CR, they get like plus 20%. These numbers aren't accurate, but just for example, if you have an Amy's dwarf mouse, because they're natural genetic mutations, they have plus 20% versus normal wild type mice. And then when you have Amy's dwarf mice plus CR, they get like plus 40% rather than no effect. Okay. So yeah, different, potentially, yeah, very different, which is cool.
Very
good, because then you're going to get more benefit from doing Rapa on top of CR in theory.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's very, very interesting. And obviously we talked about animals. Is there many people that have actually tried CRON for an extended period of time?
Yeah, we got some crazy data on them showing that it does crazy things. So we've got a good slide on that actually. We can just show it for a sec. It's really detailed. So it's more like something you should pause the video for, then look over and put it in high resolution because there's quite a lot of text there. But basically, this is a summary of all the markers that I found an effect of human calorie restriction studies for. So some of these studies have been going on for like 15 years, where people have been doing 20%, 30% calorie restriction. Because there's this thing called the CR Society. I've never really looked into it much, but it's people that it's like a forum, online forum for people that do CR. And then people, like researchers found it, and then they started using them as participants based on the fact that they're on this forum. Because there's people on this forum who have been doing CR for up to 20, 30, 40 years, even some people already. So you get that really long-term data, which is pretty crazy. So obviously it's not a randomized controlled trial, but the next best thing to a randomized controlled trial is a non-majorly flawed, non-randomized controlled trial. But there's no control group either, other than themselves, and virtual controls, which is fine. Like, it can be fine as long as you have a large enough effect size in the biomarkers, which we do see here. So it's very unusual for people to have no just like perfect arteries, perfect blood pressure, perfect BMI, perfect insulin, perfect body fat, perfect visceral fat, that's organ fat, perfect inflammation levels like CRP, perfect LDL, HDL, total cholesterol, triglycerides, TNF alpha, which is like marker of senescence associated secretory phenotype, SASP, which is like a surrogate marker for whole body senescent cell load activity. Perfect like HRV as well. It's like that's quite hard to increase. So that's like 20 to 30 years younger than their age, and you don't normally see that much. That's pretty insane. So basically, and then there's like a load of biopsy markers where they look at the mRNA levels, and they're all like crazy. You don't see that in any other therapy ever. So yeah, the human biomarker data is very, very compelling, and it completely supports the plus 5 years life expectancy you'd gain.
And do they these individuals report actually how difficult it is to just eat a reduced diet? Do they say, are they hungry all the time?
I haven't really been in the forums much. It's not a very good user experience. The forums, I think, is quite out of date. Need an update. Would recommend that if anyone's listening. So yeah, I'm not sure. It's a bit confusing on there. But I've been doing CR myself, so I can speak for myself. I've been doing it for like 7 years. So I'm 27. Been doing it since like age 20. And
how have you found that?
It's like, yeah, it's just effortless because it becomes habit. It's like anything really. It's like exercise or normal diet or anything else. It just becomes like the first few months is really hard, but then because you have to think about it, and it's like active thinking, but then it's like super easy.
Yeah, I guess once it's part of your sort of normal plan, you just sort of you adapt to it, don't you? One of the questions we had was someone wanted to know about Huel or other food replacements. So, can you be healthy with no real food, but with all the food groups and the nutrients you need?
Yeah, probably. As long as you're not like allergic to oats in some way or intolerant. So yeah, some people may be intolerant to like more modern foods. It's quite unusual. Or they may, get diabetes from a specific food based on their microbiome, based on the personalized nutrition products randomized controlled trial they did, where they found that everyone has like a unique response to foods that boost their sugar levels based on their microbiome. So yeah, as long as you don't have side effects from oats, which is like the main ingredient of Huel, or side effects from Huel, in that like it doesn't make you tired, it doesn't, it's not the only thing you eat, it doesn't like boost your blood sugar, because it may, and that might be quite common a lot of people, and it doesn't give you like weird symptoms like autoimmune symptoms, then yeah, it's fine. It's not a big deal if you eat it.
Okay.
It's more about the calories than the you're kind of, so like level 1, right, is just like basic dietary habits, vegetables, fruit, not eating loads of red meat, but like etc. And calorie restriction. It's not like about the super detailed stuff where you're going into micronutrient optimization or microtoxin minimization. That's level 2 diet, which is a lot more complicated.
So the next question is, when we as a society sort of look at what we should be eating or should not be eating, the first thing we go to as a framework is most probably the national guidelines, which you have mentioned. But these contain nothing about calorie restriction, which, looking at the data, seems to be the healthiest way to live. So do you think the national guidelines might actually be a little bit outdated?
Well, we can estimate the quality of life adjusted, quality adjusted life year impact, like the number of years of healthy life it would add to the UK, for example. So the average, I think it's like a third of the UK is obese, so BMI above 30, maybe say like, and then like another third is above BMI 25. So we like round down a bit and say that the mean BMI in the UK is 25. So 25 based on the level 1 studies, based on the studies that are based level 1 off, you're going to get lifespan benefit from going from BMI 25 to BMI 22.5. And then you're going to get a lifetime benefit from doing calorie restriction on top of that. So because most of the benefit is not being BMI 30 plus, it's going to be, you could say you get like 1 year from like plus 1 year from going BMI 25 to BMI 22.5 from the level 1 framework. And then you get plus 5 years from calorie restriction. And because if you're BMI 25, you're not doing calorie restriction unless you're like it's like edema and you have like ascites or something, but that's like statistically negligible. So it basically means no one's doing CR in the UK because the average is BMI 25. So then you can take 70 million people in the UK, and you have 5 years from CR, 1 from the BMI, that's 6 years. Even if it was only 2 years from the CR, and it only applied to men, so it didn't apply to women at all. So in total, that would give, on average, across all genders, plus to the whole UK population, it would give like plus 2 years to the UK life expectancy, which would be insane. So yeah, it shows like how big of an impact these basic lifestyle interventions could have, even in the UK, which is a developed country.
Okay, and sort of going a bit deeper onto the sort of genetics of aging and longevity, how does CRON impact the genetics or the epigenetics of individuals when they carry out calorie restriction?
So there's a lot of so it depends what you mean by genetics, whether it's DNA or methylation or other types of epigenetics or mRNA, which is kind of genetics as well. So yeah, there'll be a lot of mRNA changes. So on that slide we showed before, on the right hand side actually, it shows all of the like percent changes you see. I think this is on like a muscle biopsy from one of the studies I'm referencing. So you see like the sirtuins there, which are like very important proteins for protecting various parts of the cell. They increase hugely. So it's changing your levels of gene expression a lot. I think like ATP synthase goes up 600%, PGC1 alpha goes up 600%. Those are very important things for cell protection, mitochondrial biogenesis, etc. So yeah, at an epigenetic level, it's going to change as well, because you're not going to have those changes in mRNA unless you're seeing changes in epigenetics. So yeah, it has huge effects at the mRNA and epigenetic level. But obviously it's not going to change your genes, but it will reduce your risk of cancer, and increase your DNA repair capacity, so it'll reduce your rate of somatic nuclear mutations and probably mitochondrial mutations in the mitochondrial DNA that is outside the nucleus as well. So yeah, it's good all round. It's good all round.
And another sort of technique of manipulating your diet to help with longevity and lifespan is intermittent fasting. So what is the difference between calorie restriction and intermittent fasting?
So intermittent fasting, it doesn't have anything to do with calories. It's just to do with like your eating window. So you can do intermittent fasting but still eat the same number of calories, or you could eat more calories than you would normally. So it has nothing to do with calories. But yeah, there's like some of my studies which show if you do isocaloric, so same number of calories, intermittent fasting, where I think, so they were doing alternate day feeding, then the mice would live about 10% longer in both median and maximum lifespan. But this is only, I think there's only one study on that, so it's not like super validated pre-clinically, and it's not in monkeys either. So the evidence base is like 100 times more for calorie restriction. It's literally 100 times more. in terms of aging impact. But often the confounding factor in real life is that people, when they do intermittent fasting in whatever form, whether that's 16/8 or OMAD or alternate day feeding or prolong or whatever, or 5-day fast once every few months, you find that they're not actually just doing isocaloric intermittent fasting, they're doing hypocaloric. So they're doing calorie restriction plus intermittent fasting. And then the benefits are going to come from calorie restriction on top of intermittent fasting.
And is it something that to get the benefits from, I have to keep up for my entire life?
Well, that's what the studies show. So yeah, but probably medicine's going to get so advanced quite soon that it just doesn't matter. It'll be negligible. But yeah, obviously if you're depending on your age.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all hoping for, isn't it?
Whole life statements are very, I don't know. There are always caveats to them. People don't think it through when they say.
Yeah, I think everyone's hoping for something that we can take that will mean we get the benefits from calorie restriction, yet we can carry on eating whatever we like. I mean, that's the sort of holy grail, isn't it?
Yeah.
So where can people find studies? Where can people find studies and keep up to date with longevity research in calorie restriction and all manner of longevity research?
Yep. So I've got presentations with references on my website. I've got over 100 referenced guides on every level 1, 2, 3 topic that I'm building out into longevity school coming soon, which will be like Robot Me. So you can learn everything about how to implement level 1, 2, 3 and have like a nice community to do it with in like video format. It's a lot easier than trying to read lots of papers and trying to do it yourself. But yeah, it's all on my website. I've got loads of guides up there, loads of resources, and we're adding new stuff all the time. And also, if you're keen, you can join our WhatsApp group as well, where we discuss evidence every day. It's called the Evidence-Based Longevity WhatsApp group.
Brilliant. Perfect. Well, I think that is all we've got time for today. So again, thank you so much for joining me, Ollie.
Thanks very much, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah, and thank you for watching, guys. Please remember, go and check out the website, goinglive.com, where you can catch up on all the latest news from the world of longevity. So yeah, thank you again for joining, and we'll see you next week.